StraightAllDay.com.
You are now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one show. This is a daily masterclass you're listening to right now. Do not dare call this a podcast. You call it a podcast if you're talking to someone who doesn't understand so that they know what you're talking about. But this is not a podcast. This is a masterclass, and it is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. In today's topic, we're going to talk about full spectrum thinking. F-U-L-L, full spectrum thinking is the topic here today. Now, before I get into explaining what this is and then why it is and then how you can actually make sure that you're using it, let me tell everyone I have a text message line where you can actually text me. Yes, you can text me. And you can share with me your feedback on anything you hear on this show, whether you're watching on video, whether you're listening on audio, or anything else that you may want to engage with me on. If you have a question, you have a comment, you have a concern, there's a challenge that I can help you with, you can send me a text directly and engage with me. And yes, I will text you back. My number is 305-384-6894. Again, 305-384-6894. In addition to engaging with me through the text, you will also be receiving, once you join my texting community, you'll be receiving my daily motivation text messages, which I send out every single day straight to your phone. And yeah, once you're in, you're going to get my daily motivation text. So that number, again, 305-384-6894. The number is down below in the show notes, wherever you happen to be listening to this, just in case you didn't catch the number the 3 times that I just said it. So the topic again today, the full spectrum thinking. This is a close blood relative, full spectrum thinking, of critical thinking, which we talked about in episodes 1826 and 1827. If you are a critical thinker, you are very eligible. It'll make you very, very susceptible to developing of the ability to think in a full spectrum. What full spectrum thinking is when we investigate the nuance and explore the gray areas of topics, which is in stark contrast to what is known as binary thinking. And binary thinking is where there are complex topics that people choose to, or maybe they don't even know they're choosing to, where they overly simplify things into being one side or another. And there are many examples of this. For example, when I did the 4-part series on the anti-racism book written by Ibram Kendi, which is episodes 1788 through 1791, there was a lot of binary thinking in that book where he drew a clear line. And he said, if you're doing these things, then you are racist. And if you're doing these things, then you are anti-racist. That is binary thinking. The challenge to that binary thinking, which I explained in that 4-part series, the reason I did a 4-part series, because there was so much binary thinking in that book that it almost blew me away in the way that he laid it out. But I know exactly why he did it. It was actually a good marketing tactic, because challenging people to think critically is usually not a good business move, because most people don't think critically. Most people don't want to. If you want to get your ideas out to the masses of people, you got to keep them as simple as possible. Now, Ibram Kendi did that in his book. Donald Trump did it in his campaign. And a lot of people do it in life. And again, some of them knowing exactly what they're doing, many of them not even knowing that they're doing it, but they do it just by habit because it's just the way that they think. Most people are not critical thinkers, because critical thinking, again, requires you to understand the gray areas of situations, which means understanding that the truth, as I told you in episode, I believe it was 1777, but let me make sure I'm giving you the right number there. Yeah, 1777. The truth is never sexy, meaning the truth usually in life is somewhere in between the extremes of where you always have any topic that comes up, especially one that's highly emotionalized. Anything that involves politics, anything that involves race, anything that involves sex or gender, usually what do we see these days? And some of you who are listening to me, let's call it out, you're guilty of this, is that we sensationalize things and we put people on the extremes. All right, you're either this or you're that. You're either seeing things the way that I see them or you're wrong. You're either over here on this side or you're over here on that side. The fact of life is, the actual fact is that the truth is usually somewhere in between the extremes. But since most people are binary thinkers, they can only see things at one extreme or at another extreme. Most people fail at what we're talking about here today, which is called full spectrum thinking. Full spectrum thinking means understanding, yes, there are some things that people all the way on this side believe that are actually correct. And there's some things that people on a complete other side, some things they believe is actually correct as well. And the truth is usually somewhere in between the two of them. The problem is, since most people either gather at one end of the curve or the other end of the curve, neither people on either side can ever admit that anything that the other side has to say could possibly be right, or that anything on their side could possibly be wrong, which makes all of them wrong, because the truth is usually never at the far extremes of a conversation. This is what full spectrum thinking means. Understanding that there is a gray area in life. Most things in life, there is a gray area. When people are trying to hustle you or they're playing on your emotions, they don't explore the gray areas at all. They completely ignore the gray areas, and they tell you that you're either on one side or you're on another side. Again, binary thinking. And let me be clear. Let me give credit to binary thinking. That binary thinking works when you're trying to move a mass of people. When you want to get a whole bunch of people to agree with something, you can't give them full spectrum thinking, because full spectrum thinking requires too much thought. It requires too much mental energy. And the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, most people don't have the mental energy to give. And for most people, if you give them too much full spectrum thinking to think about, it will go completely over their heads. It will overtax their mental capacities, and they're just going to give up, and they're not going to be able to understand. So if you want to move a mass of people, like let's just say if you're running for a political office or something, you can't be too detailed. You can't dip too much into the gray areas, because you'll go over too many people's heads, and only really, really smart people are going to be able to understand you, and therefore you're going to lose the election. So if you want to win an election, look at how many politicians do. They keep their ideas very, very simple. If you want to take a emotionalized topic, and you want to become a person who is known as a thought leader on that topic, whether you're actually did any too much thinking or not, then you have to use binary thinking. You have to. This is what Mr. Kenny did for his book. He used binary thinking, and he worked it to his advantage, because again, it doesn't require people to think too hard with the things that he's saying. But people who do think hard, people who are critical thinkers, can look at the things that he said and his conclusions and say, wait, these don't even make sense. And then people could listen to you saying they don't make sense and say, well, you're not making sense, you're wrong, because some people are thinking in a binary way and other people are thinking in a full spectrum way. So we're looking at the same screen, but we're seeing two different TV shows, if you understand what I'm saying. So it's not that one person is right and one person is wrong, it's just that we're looking at things completely differently. And that's why I had to explain this concept of full spectrum thinking, so that everyone understands why there seems to be such a divide between the way people see the exact same situations in so many areas of life right now, that we have basically a culture war going on on so many different fronts. And this is why again, I'm explaining binary thinking versus this full spectrum thing, which we're talking about here today. In understanding why some people may overly simplify certain topics. And again, I'm being clear here, it's not even that when people overly simplify a topic that they're wrong for doing so. They may be doing it on a completely strategic level, and they may be doing it in a way that they're being strategic, but don't even know that they're being strategic. So you're gonna have to draw your own conclusions for that, because we can't read other people's minds, so we don't know what they're actually thinking, but this will help you understand what they're doing, again, whether they're doing it on purpose or not. So let's get to it. Point number one, the topic once again is full spectrum thinking. If you wish to be a full spectrum thinker, that's what I'm going to explain here today. Number one, embrace the gray. What does that mean? It means embrace the fact that there's more than one way to look at any situation, and again, the truth is never sexy. If you just keep that idea in mind, it will help you decipher a lot of what you hear in the media, a lot of what you see on the news, wherever you get your news from, whether it's from social media, whether you actually watch TV, whether you read newspapers, whether you hear from another person, what you see in the back and forth dialogue going on people's social media pages. If you remember that the truth is never sexy, you'll notice that when people are thinking in a binary way or speaking in a binary way, in other words, when they're saying something like, you either have this idea or you're completely wrong, or you're completely on this side or you're completely on that side, when people are talking in that binary way, understand that the truth is, they're not saying what they're saying is not the truth. They may call it the truth, but it's not the truth, because the truth is not sexy. The truth is not in some neat thing that just fit into this tight little package that just is easy to understand in 7 words or less. Usually not what it is. Full spectrum thinkers can see the pros and cons of both or all sides of a conversation. Say that one more time. And this will help you really understand when you're dealing with a critical thinker if you're not. And most people, just to give you a hint, just to give you a head start, most people are not critical thinkers, especially on highly emotionalized topics. There are people who are critical thinkers on topics that are not emotional, but as soon as you bring a topic that touches them emotionally, their critical thinking skills go completely out of the window. Full spectrum thinkers can see the pros and the cons of every side of a conversation, meaning they can point out some positive traits of an opinion with which they completely disagree. And they can point out some of the weaknesses of an opinion which they hold. That's what a full spectrum thinker can do. Now, let me ask you a question right now. How many people do you know who fit that description? I bet you could count them on one hand, even if you don't have all your fingers. Now, I want you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, do you fit that description? Can you see the pros of an idea that you disagree with? And can you see the cons of an idea that you do agree with? Many people are, again, terrible at this, especially on a topic which touches their emotions, because emotion overpowers logic. And the reason is that many people are terrible at this, as I just talked about. Many people just bring so much emotion into their critical thinking that they basically water down their own critical thinking. It's hard to be a critical thinker when you're emotionalized. It's kind of nearly impossible. Not too many things are impossible, but it's close to impossible. It's kind of like putting too much salt on your food, or no wonder it tastes bad when you put too much emotion on top of your critical thinking. To be a critical thinker, you have to suspend your emotions. You have to take your emotion out of the equation. Why? Because when you're emotionalized on a subject, you are blinded to maybe some of the weaknesses of something you agree with, and you're blinded to some of the strength of something that you disagree with. Full spectrum thinkers, they understand this inherent human weakness, because we're all of us being human, we all have emotion. All right, some of us are more in touch with our emotions than others. Some of us are more in control of our emotions than others, but all of us being human, we all are emotional. So critical full spectrum thinkers are able to understand that because they can be highly emotional on a topic, that they have to, sometimes consciously and on purpose, suspend their emotion so they can critically look at the situation and ask themselves, okay, am I really looking at this as it is, or am I just seeing it as I am? Am I just looking at this through the lens of my emotion, or am I looking at it through the lens of, all right, this is what actually makes sense? If I was not emotionally engaged in this topic, what would I say about it then? And again, this is a skill that can be developed, but you have to be conscious about this. For some people, it comes naturally, but for most of us, we would have to consciously really think about this so that we make sure, okay, am I actually telling myself something that is coming from my emotion? Am I speaking from emotion now, or am I speaking from logic and actually making sense? And the more people that you know who are able to look at your situation because they are emotionally detached from it, and you can take feedback from those people, the better you'll be able to notice it in yourself when you might be letting your emotions get the better of your critical thinking skills. Point number 2, today's topic once again is full spectrum thinking. People who think in the full spectrum in this day and age, well, you're going to make a majority of the people that you deal with and engage with, they're going to be mad at you. When you're a full spectrum thinker, you'll know, because people will start getting annoyed with you. They'll get upset with you. People will attack you. People will tell you that you're wrong. People will try to lecture you and tell you why you have the wrong idea and why you shouldn't think the way that you think, or you shouldn't say the things that you're saying. This is what happens when you're a full spectrum thinker. The reason is not because there's anything wrong with full spectrum thinking per se, but because most people are not full spectrum thinkers. They are binary thinkers. So they have basically picked a side on certain topics. And when you refuse to pick a side, and you can say, look, I understand some of your points, but I disagree with some, but I also understand some of the points on the other side of your idea, and also disagree with some of the points on the other side of the idea. They'll be mad at you because you're not 100% in on the same opinion that they're 100% in on. This is what happens when you're a full spectrum thinker. Because you understand that the truth is never sexy, the people who want the truth to fit in a tight, neat little box that's so sexy and perfect that just fits their paradigm of life, they won't like the fact that you don't see things the way that they see them. Why? Because they're not critical thinkers. Critical thinkers understand that people may disagree with them and see things differently from them, and that's all right. And it's actually, they should be happy that people see things differently from them so that we can get more than one perspective on certain topics. But again, someone who's a critical thinker would accept that, but someone who's not a critical thinker can't understand that. They're more of an emotional thinker, so they can't understand why you're not seeing things the way they see them. So instead of trying to understand it and learn, what they would do is criticize you. Now again, how many people do you know who fit either description? Most people have been conditioned into binary thinking and can only see their side of things. I talked about this in episode 1690, a dirty secret that the social media platforms don't want you to know. It was part of that conversation. The bigger conversation was really talking about the business angle of social media platforms, but one of the reasons why social media platforms make the money that they make is because they get so much of our time, attention, and focus. In other words, how much time we spend on those apps. All right? How do they get us to spend so much time on an app? Why do you spend so much time on a social media app? Do you think it's because the app is just so much fun? Do you think it's because you like looking at the pictures? Do you think it's because you're getting informed by people's captions and posts? No. The reason why you spend so much time on a social media app is because the apps are engineered scientifically, algorithmically, to give you more of what they predict you already agree with. This is what social media apps do. So whatever you show you like, they're going to show you more of those things. Now, what if you have a certain opinion that is based on a binary thought? Okay, anybody who thinks this way is right, anybody who thinks this way is wrong, they're going to show you more things of the stuff that they know you already agree with based on your actions on that app. So therefore, you're going to become more and more indoctrinated into that way of thinking to the point that it becomes binary thinking, that you could not even fathom and understand how someone could see anything differently from the way that you see it, because the social media app has given you so much feedback and so much reinforcement of the idea that you showed up with that it gets to the point where your mind is so warped that you can't even understand how somebody can see anything any different from how you see it. Now you're so indoctrinated that when someone comes along with a different idea from you, you immediately go into emotion. You're immediately triggered into emotion because your logic has been turned off. Like, look at all these different examples and all this reinforcement of people who agree with my point of view. How could anyone disagree with it? This is what the social media apps have done. And again, you might not even notice this if you're not thinking about it. And if you haven't logically thought about it, they have indoctrinated you into this. And this is why social media can become, depending on who you're listening to and what conversation is happening in the topic, it become a cesspool of conversation because people just can't even understand. Again, they don't have full spectrum thinking. They don't think critically. They can't logically understand how someone could see anything any different from how they do. And it's not because people are dumb. It's not because people are bad. It's because the people who work at these social media companies, these people are engineers. These are very, very smart people. They're smarter than all of us. So they have learned how to jigger their programs to program us to think a certain way. And it's not because social media apps want people to be at each other's throats. Again, social media makes their money by keeping you on the app. So their question is, how do we keep people on the app? Okay, but keep people on the app by giving them more of what they already agree with. Now, whether what you already agree with and giving you more of it makes you go at another person's throat is just collateral damage to them. That's not really part of their business model. They don't really care about that. What they care about is just keeping you on the app. And if that's what keeps you on the app and makes them more money, then that's what they're going to do. All right, so the fact that is created, basically it's part of what's created. We're not going to put it all on them, but it's part of what's created this culture war that we have going on in the world right now. That's just collateral damage to them because they're making money and they are in the business world and their business is making money. So I can't fault them 100% for it, but they are part of the situation. I'm not even going to say they're part of. I'm not even going to say that they created the problem. I'm not going to blame it on them because this is business, and if that's what they got to do to make money, then that's what they have to do. And there are plenty of other companies who do things that someone could look at and say, well, there's a little bit of wrong in this, quote unquote, wrong in this, but is actually making them money. I mean, we could have a whole conversation just on that alone. It could be a whole show based on that alone. I'm sure there are shows like that. It's not going to be this show, but just giving you an example. Most people are conditioned, as I said, into these binary ways of thinking. None of us was born as a binary thinker. As kids, think about how you were with a kid, or any of you who has kids, or any of you who deals with kids on a consistent basis. What do kids do all day? They ask questions. They're inquisitive. They're always asking why. Well, why do you think that way? Why did you say that? Why are things going the way that they're going? As kids, we all were like this. We were all asking questions, learning, trying to figure out, and just trying to see what was going on in the world. And we would always ask questions when something didn't quite make sense to us. But as we become adults, and sometimes this happens as early as our mid-teens, we get to the point where we stop asking questions, and what do we start doing? We start assuming that we know all there is to know about a thing, about an idea, about a person, based on what? One piece of information, maybe even less than that. You really think about that. That's really what happens to us as adults. And we can't blame social media for that. We do that to ourselves. As kids, we're asking all the questions, just trying to learn and just always trying to figure things out. We're always asking questions. As we get older, we get indoctrinated into this binary way of thinking that the way that we think or the way that someone told us to think is the only way to think. And when someone comes with a different idea, instead of being inquisitive and trying to find out why they think differently from us, we just assume we know why they think differently, that they must be wrong, they must be racist, they must be stupid, they must be uninformed, they must just want things to be terrible, and we don't even ask any more questions. Now, who can say that they're not guilty of that? All of us are guilty of that. There was a video that I put out on YouTube about in the middle of July 2021, where I was discussing a situation that happened at ESPN with a analyst by the name of Stephen A. Smith. Now, Stephen A. Smith came out on his show, First Take. Now, Stephen A., by the way, if you don't know who he is, he's the most popular sports commentator. He's probably the most popular commentator in all of sports, most popular analyst in sports. And he doesn't do like live game play-by-play stuff. He just is on ESPN. He gives his opinions before games, after games. He does TV shows. He does radio. He's one of the hardest working men out there, at least by how much we see him all the time. And Stephen A. Smith was having a conversation with his co-host, and the question was asked about an Asian baseball player who's in the major leagues right now by the name of Ohtani. That's his last name, Ohtani. And he's just killing it in baseball right now. He's a good pitcher. He's also a good hitter. He's hitting monster home runs and all this stuff. He's basically one of the best players in baseball right now, maybe the best player in baseball. And the question was asked of Stephen A. Smith, do you think it may be a challenge for Major League Baseball that this guy, Ohtani, may become the face of Major League Baseball because, and here's the truth about Ohtani, is that he always speaks through an interpreter. He doesn't speak English. I guess he's not comfortable enough speaking English on his own that he does it with the reporters. He always speaks through an interpreter. And Stephen A. Smith's answer was, yes, it will be a challenge for Major League Baseball to have a guy who does not speak English on his own, at least to the media, as the face of baseball, because he's not going to be able to communicate with the people directly the way that most of the stars that we're used to promoting and seeing, the way that they do. I mean, I think that's a fair point. You may consider that a criticism. You may agree or disagree, but it's a fair point that someone who's not speaking English is going to have trouble being the face of a sport in an English-speaking country, which is the United States of America. I think that's a fair point. Again, it's not even whether you agree or disagree. Is it a fair enough point? If you're a full spectrum thinker, I think you can agree that's a fair point, even if you don't think it's correct. Now, I put out the video and I said exactly that. I said, here's what happened actually before I even get to that. After Stephen A. Smith made this comment, and I'm paraphrasing it pretty accurately as to what he said, the very next day, Stephen A. Smith got all kinds of blowback on social media. People saying that he was promoting Asian hate, that he was being racist, that he was attacking Asians for making a comment that he made, to the point that Stephen A. Smith went on, first of all, he went on Twitter and he put out this little apology post that he posted on his Twitter. Then the next day they opened the show, he did a whole apology segment. A baseball writer came on, I think the guy is of Asian descent. He came on and he basically dressed down Stephen A. Smith on Stephen A. Smith's show on national TV and told Stephen A. Smith how he was promoting ignorance and all of this stuff by saying what he said about this Asian baseball player, Ohtani. And Stephen A. Smith was basically like a little kid being cussed out by his school teacher and his parents. And I had to go sit in the corner for 15 minutes because he had did something wrong. And I remember watching this and saying, like, wait a minute, Stephen A. Smith didn't say anything crazy. He didn't say anything racist. He offered an opinion. He gets paid for his opinion. He's the highest paid person at ESPN for giving his opinions, for maybe going a little bit over the top sometimes. And I don't think what he said about the baseball players over the top at all. Again, even if you disagree with his point, he didn't say anything crazy. So I went and put out a video and said exactly what I just told you, that he didn't say anything crazy. It was crazy to me the way that ESPN allowed this other writer to come on there and dress him down, and how Stephen A. Smith had to go on social media and apologize. And I said the main reason why he had to apologize is because he said something about an Asian guy. And right now, Asians are the number one group to protect, so to speak, in America, because we had the Stop Asian Hate hashtag, and then you saw these viral videos of Asian people being attacked. And so this whole thing about anything that happens to an Asian person, we got to make a big deal about it and make sure that we're protecting these Asian people. For a while it was black people, now Asian people have kind of taken the lead, I said in a tongue-in-cheek type of way. And there were people who came into that on YouTube and left comments on my video and said, well, it was bad what you said. They said, well, Dre, you're just defending black people's right to say dumb racist stuff. And I guess they assumed that that's the way that I look at things because I'm black. Well, if they listen to this show, they would know that they couldn't be further from the truth. Now, you listen to this show, you know that. But I'm giving you all of that just to illustrate the point that many people, because they're such binary thinkers, they go off of one piece of information. They saw me, a black guy, saying something where I was quote unquote defending a black guy who said something allegedly quote unquote racist about an Asian guy. And they said, oh, well, you're just defending black people, so for their right to say racist stuff. Now, again, if they even knew the half of the type of stuff that I talk about and my approach, they would know that that couldn't be further from the truth. Now, you all know that, but they didn't know that. And this is the exact point that I'm making. That was just these people who left those comments saying that to me are just a microcosm of what we have going on in the world now. We get one little piece of information about somebody, and then we just go off and say, all right, well, I know everything I need to know about them. And well, even is one thing to think it, is another thing to say it out loud. And social media has allowed us to say it out loud, and then another person says it, and another person says it, and it gets amplified. And again, algorithms are engineered to promote whatever it is they want to promote. That Stephen A. Smith thing could have just came and went. Social media apps and algorithms promoted that thing that Stephen A. Smith has said and made a big deal out of it, to the point that everybody was talking about it, to the point that Stephen A. had to apologize, to the point that it became a big news story when it should have been a throwaway comment that got said and got put back in the can wherever it came from. Nobody actually cared. And the funny thing about the whole thing is that Ohtani, the baseball player, probably doesn't know any of this even took place. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is full spectrum thinking, what it means and how to engage in it. Full spectrum thinking does not mean that you cannot have an opinion. But when you are a full spectrum thinker, you can admit when another person has an opinion, when they have an opinion that opposes yours, you can admit when they have a good point. And you can be willing and able to poke holes in your own side of the situation. Many people are incapable of doing either of those things because they're not critical thinkers, and they appear to think that admitting any weakness in their own perspective means that they have somehow lost the conversation or lost the argument or debate or whatever they want to call themselves doing. I use myself as an example. Here on this show, if you listen to the 2 episodes of this show, you probably get a good feeling that I present strong opinions on many topics, opinions that sometimes might piss some people off. And I'm good at pointing out the holes in other people's arguments and cornering them on their bullshit to the point that they either have to admit that they said some bullshit or they had to tap out or just avoid the conversation in the first place. Now, my opinions, when I share them here on this show, I lay them out. I try to lay them out in as much detail as possible so you understand exactly where I'm coming from and why. My opinions are based on logic. They're not based on emotion. So when I deal with people who are not like me and they base their opinions on emotion and not logic, they get annoyed with me or they'll get angry with me that my logic does not empathize with their emotions. So it makes it hard for many people to argue or debate with me. And it's not that this is good or bad. It's not that that makes me more right or that makes them wrong. It's just a full spectrum view of my style. I understand this. You could call that a strength. You could also call it a weakness, that I don't really empathize with people's emotions when we're having a conversation that's based on something that I see as a logical, all right, let's look at this logically and let's lay out exactly what's going on. Let's think of this in a critical way. Let's look at this in a full spectrum type of way, not based on our emotions, which can change from minute to minute, but based on logic, which is something that we can all lay out in black and white, and let's see exactly what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And again, that could be a strength. It could be a weakness, depending on who you're talking to and depending on what room that you're in. But I can point out, this is the reason I'm giving you all of that, is to let you understand. I can point out my virtues and I can point out my faults, and sometimes they're the exact same thing. That's the gray that many people can't accept about themselves, about their own opinions, and about just life. Nothing and no one is all good or all bad or all virtuous or all terrible. Let me say that one more time. Nothing. No opinion, no way of being, no entity, no company, no idea, nothing is all good or all bad. No person is all virtuous or all terrible. So next time you hear somebody talking about a person with whom they disagree and they're telling you all the negative things about them, ask them, tell me 3 or 5 positive things about this person without being sarcastic. Without sarcasm, tell me 3, 4, 5 positive things about this person. If they can't do it, you're dealing with someone who's not a critical thinker. And next time someone's talking about something they agree with and they start telling you all the reasons why it's a perfect idea and why it can't possibly be wrong, ask them to point out 3, 4, or 5 holes in the argument, 3, 4, or 5 criticisms of that thing that are legitimate and had to be, can stand up in a conversation. Ask them to do that. Ask them to point out 3, 4, or 5 holes in their own argument that they agree with. If they can't do it, you're dealing with someone who's not a critical thinker. This is the gray area that most people are unable to accept, especially, again, when they start getting into their emotions. Next time you see someone really going hard for a specific point of view, ask them to criticize that point of view. Can they do it? Check their objectivity. I told you, I did a whole episode just on that very point, just because of how much I've seen it. I told you that objectivity is the new controversial. Being objective is the new controversial now, because if you're being objective, then again, most of these people who are binary thinkers can't understand you. That was episode 1800. And just a week later, I told you how to be an objective thinker. That was episode 1808. Point number 4, today's topic once again is full spectrum thinking. If you cannot see the good or the bad in something, you are probably missing something. If you cannot see the good or the bad in something, anything you're looking at, all you can see is how perfect it is, or all you can see is how terrible it is. That something could be a person, place, or thing. You're missing something. If you're a Republican or a Democrat and you can't tell me some good ideas that the other side has, you're thinking in a binary way. Because neither side is all right. If you can't criticize the very cause that you are championing, then you're thinking binary. When entrepreneurs, if any of you ever watched the TV show Shark Tank, when entrepreneurs go on that show to sell their business or to get funding for their business, by the way, those who know what Shark Tank is, where entrepreneurs go into a show and they present their business to a room full of maybe 4 or 5 or 6 sharks. These are people who just have a lot of money, and they have money that they can invest into businesses to help these entrepreneurs out or buy their businesses from them outright. When those entrepreneurs go on Shark Tank, the sharks always want to know, what is the challenge in this business? What's the challenge in your industry? I mean, you're here on this show not because of your benevolence and you just want to give of your business to us. It's not because you just want to help other people out by sharing and your business is making so much money. There's some kind of challenge that you're dealing with, Mr. Entrepreneur, that made you come on this show and ask us for our help, whether it's financial, whether it's our connections, whether it's the knowledge that we have. What is the challenge that you're dealing with? The sharks always want to know what's the crux of the reason why you're here. You are not here just to share your wealth with us because you're charitable. Where are you failing that I can help you out? The sharks always want to know the answer to that question. If you go on Shark Tank and you say, well, everything's going perfect in my business, I just want to get some more money, all right, they're going to throw you out the room. All right, you won't even be on, your appearance won't even come on TV. All right, you leave that part out, you're going to leave with nothing. The point is, even when your things are going good, even when you appear to be successful and things are working out for you and you're getting the outcomes that you want to get, that doesn't mean everything you're doing is perfect. It doesn't mean everything you're doing is right, and it doesn't mean you don't have challenges. All of us do. And since all of us do have challenges, understand that every entity you're a part of, every group you identify with, every opinion that you agree with, there are challenges to that too. And if you're unable to see that, then you're not thinking in a full spectrum way. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we recap today's class, which is full spectrum thinking. This is a close blood relative of critical thinking, which we covered in episodes 18, 26, and 27. Full spectrum thinking is when you investigate nuance and explore the gray areas of topics, which is in contrast to binary thinking, where we take a complex topic and we overly simplify it into being just this black and white thing. Point number 1, to be a full spectrum thinker, embrace the gray. What that means is see the pros and cons of all sides of a conversation. Many people are terrible at this because they are too emotionally engaged in a topic to see the pros and cons of something with which they disagree or agree, respectfully. Point number 2, full spectrum thinking will make a majority of people mad at you because most people are emotional thinkers, so they can't understand how you can see the pros in something that they hate or the cons in something that they love. Most people have been conditioned into binary thinking, so they can only see their side of things, and they will take one little piece of information about a topic. If they already disagree with it, they'll find one little negative thing, and that will just solidify their thoughts. If they already agree with it, they'll find one positive thing, and that's all they need. Don't even ask questions anymore. As kids, we would always ask questions. We were inquisitive, trying to learn. As adults, we assume we know everything, when most of us don't know much. Point number 3, full spectrum thinking does not mean you cannot have an opinion. But you also must be willing to admit when someone else has a good point, even if their point goes against yours. And be willing to poke holes in your own side of the situation, even though you're not changing your opinion. Many people are incapable of this because they are not critical thinkers, and they appear to think that admitting any weakness in their perspective means they have somehow lost because they're thinking on an emotional level rather than a logical level. It's not about winning or losing when you're a critical thinker. It's about getting to what is actually correct and what is actually true. And again, the truth is rarely sexy. My opinions, for example, are based on logic, not emotions. And when I deal with people who are based their thinking more on emotion, they can get annoyed with me, they can get angry with me, so it makes it hard for people to go back and forth with me. It's not a good or bad thing. It's a full spectrum view of my style. My virtues and my faults can sometimes be the exact same thing. This is the gray that many people cannot accept. And it's not about anyone being good or right or bad or wrong. But next time you see someone going really hard for a specific point of view, ask them to criticize that point of view. Check their objectivity. Are they capable of doing it? Most of the time, you're going to be disappointed to find out the answer is no. Point number 4, if you cannot see the good or the bad in something, that means there's something that you're missing, because there is no person, idea, thing, movement, action that is all perfect or all terrible. So when entrepreneurs, for example, go on Shark Tank to sell their businesses, the sharks always want to know what's the challenge that you're dealing with, because if everything was going perfect, you wouldn't be here. And if people leave that information out, they're going to walk out of there with nothing. Where's the gray area in anything that you're doing, anything that you're dealing with? There does exist one. If you don't see it, that means you just haven't looked hard enough. Or maybe you're just not thinking in a full spectrum way. Send me a text. Tell me the best insight you got from today's class. My number is 305-384-6894. And for any of you entrepreneurs out there, business professionals, people who are looking to grow, you're looking for someone who can help hold you accountable, help you see things in a full spectrum way, help you notice where the strengths and weaknesses are in maybe whatever argument or point of view you have, then I've opened up my 3rd-day mastermind. It is the most direct coaching that I'm offering. You can sign up to get a call with me so we can find out exactly where you're at, where you're going, and how I can help you by going to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.